Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk on this glorious Wednesday. Hope everybody is doing well. I'm doing pretty good. Been a busy few days, but I'm doing pretty good. My leg is still messed up, but you know, that's kind of an ongoing story here. For those that don't know, I have an infection called cellulitis, and it is no fun at all. It's a very nasty little infection, and it gets literally into your skin, and it inflames the skin. It makes the muscles, it makes everything swell basically in the affected area, and for the first part of it, I could not bear any weight on my leg at all. But now I can walk, and to a limited degree, I can walk a wee bit and that kind of thing. And I have some mobility, but my leg and my foot in particular, my left lower leg and my left foot are still pretty swollen. So I'm on some pretty hefty penicillin, which is kicking my ass. I have to take those 4 times a day. No fun. So that is still an ongoing thing. But other than that, I'm doing pretty well, folks. So I hope everybody is all right and has had a good few days. Thank you must go to Louis from Alps Media for being available to come talk to us on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. And we did a giveaway for an Audiobox Go, which is cool little miniature-sized audio box that we make over at Presonus. And Paul Morgan was the winner for that. And hopefully Louis has hooked him up with that, and it will be on his way to him very, very soon. So Paul, please, if you are here, please do let us know when you get it and what you think. That would be very, very cool. But we will be doing, because that was kind of a US only giveaway, because Louis is based in the United States and he can only ship internally within North America. So it makes it a little bit tricky for shipping elsewhere around the world. So we will be doing another giveaway, which I'm working on sorting out, so that we can do it for the UK and Europe. So we're working on that just now. I am talking to 1 or 2 people who can help me organize that. So that's going to be pretty cool when we get to do that. So we'll do pretty much exactly the same thing, and we'll get that giveaway done. And the next big kind of event really that we would do a giveaway for, of any kind really, would be for getting to 6,000 subscribers. So that was the reason why we did this one, because we have just recently crossed over into 5,000 subscribers. So we've got about 5,053 at the moment, the last time I checked. So which is fantastic. It's taken a wee while to get here. It's taken like nearly 10 years, in fact, to get here. But I'm very glad that we've got here. Certainly going from getting the first 1,000 takes a wee while, but after that, the next 2,000, then 3,000, then 4,000, then 5,000 have gone by actually very, very quickly over, like maybe 4 years or something. So I am very pleased about that, and all of that is down to you guys pretty much for sharing my videos and sharing Sunday Night Live and the Songwriting Simplified show as well, certainly since I've been hosting it, because I used to do this show, for those of you that don't know, I used to do this show with Jonny, my partner in crime, over on his channel. We did it on his channel for many years. We did it for about 5 years over on his channel, and now I host it exclusively here on my own channel, basically to free up some time for Jonny for other commitments that he has. So I was glad to kind of take it over and host it here. So that's all pretty cool, and I'm very glad to be able to do this show. Now, let's go see who is here. Billy Morgan was first in the door, followed by Dwayne. I didn't do this on Sundays, so I'm doing it now. And Kevin over at Kevin's Guitar Stories is here as well. Carl Trudziak is here. Ronald Figura is here. And Semog Eng, mixing and mastering engineer. I'm glad you're here. I think you're new to my channel, so welcome. I'm glad you're here. I hope you find what I do here on this channel helpful and beneficial to you, especially the Studio One stuff. And if you're a songwriter or you're a beginner songwriter, this show is also pretty good for you too. Let's see, we got Don Oliver here as well. We got Brett Marler, and we also have, that's it, I think. Let me see, Paul Morgan is here, and Keith over at Radio Talk Frumpy is here as well. And I think that's pretty much it. And of course, that's Marcos. Thank you, Marcos. I like the name. I like the name for your channel you got there, Marcos. Well done. That's very cool. And Rich Cresswell is here as well. Rich is awesome. He has a channel called Studio One Tuts, which you will have seen there as well. He's basically here twice, which is great. Which you should check out if you're into Studio One and you want to learn more about Studio One and how to get the best out of it. Then Studio One Tuts is the place to go. And I have to be careful how I say that because I have said it wrong before, very entertainingly, which we don't want to be doing too much. And speaking of whom, Louis is here as well from House Media. I can see some confetti being thrown, which is fantastic. I didn't even know you could do that. Wow. Since when have you been able to throw party confetti and stuff? That's very, very cool. There you go, Gomez. I like it. That's very cool. Gomez mirrored. That's very great. I like that. All right, so tonight we are continuing our discussion on harmony. We've been kind of talking about chords and things like that for a couple of weeks and the reason being is that chords are the building block of our songs. And the more chords you have in your vocabulary, the more interesting music you can make and the more diverse and interesting sounds you can get for your songs, rather than just kind of relying upon, fairly standard chord progressions. We're going to look at some of those fairly standard sets of chord changes tonight. But the idea is get these under your belt if you haven't already. If you have, great. This is going to be a wee refresher on how to build those chord changes. And then break out of them and find some other chords. Find, chords from different keys and borrow them into the key that you're in to create something new and something interesting. That's kind of where I'm going to take it. So kind of going through the bare bones building blocks first, and then over successive weeks, I'll start showing you how you can break it out of the mold and you can get into more interesting chords and how you can borrow chords from different key centers to make something very interesting for your song. So that's kind of where we're going. I hope that you are finding all of this stuff very, very useful. All right, Louis says that he'll be reaching out to Paul when he returns to California. That's awesome. Paul says, our thirds and Paul and Paul, different people. I'm going to have to kind of have my wits about me here. Are thirds and fifths outdated? No, they're essential. We'll come on to that, don't worry. And Zap is here as well. Brett says, do you ever stack chords to build more complex voicings? Yes, and we're going to come on to that as well. You guys are jumping the gun just a wee bit, but that's okay. We are going to cover kind of how you can layer one chord on top of another and build kind of things like hexachords and tetrachords and polychords that will make for something really interesting. Even if you're a guitar player, you can still do this. So tonight we're going to look at we kind of talked about chords with different bass notes a little bit last week. So we're going to kind of continue that discussion on how you can use chords with different bass notes to make something interesting and unique and modern and complex sounding without it actually being complicated. Okay, so the secret sauce is having a three-note triad with another bass note underneath it that doesn't belong to that triad, and you can make really interesting sounds that sound really hip and really modern and they sound complex without actually being complex. So, and the bands probably who are the best, the songwriters who are the best exponents of this would be people like Becker and Fagan. Burt Bacharach does this pretty famously as well. Marvin Hamlish, the great arranger, is fond of these particular sounds, but you'll find these also in classical music as well. John Williams is pretty famous for some of these kind of sounds that we're going to look at. All right, so if you remember from previous shows that we've done, I talked about numbering the scale from 1 to 7. Now, I don't include the one above that because the octave is the same as 1. Okay, so if we call that 1, we're going to call this one 1 as well. It's just a new 1, an octave above it. All right. So if we start on C, and you can translate this to any key. All right. So we go, and this is major. All right. So 1 major, C major. We have chord 1 here. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 again. Okay. So in a major key, chord 1 is major because it's a major key, right? So we're using the notes from this scale, the major scale, to make up these chords. So chord 1 is going to be major, chord 2 is minor, chord 3 is minor, chord 4 major, chord 5 major, but could also be regarded as dominant, 6 minor, 7 is the weird one because it's diminished. It's so loaded with tension because it's basically stacked minor thirds, which resolves to there, to 1. Okay, so you get 1 major, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 dominant, 6 minor, 7 diminished, 1 major. Okay, so standard chord changes will revolve around this kind of numbering system. And if you are into music from Nashville and you understand something called the Nashville numbering system, that will be familiar to you because that's what they do. They'll, instead of having G major, A minor, D7, they will go 1, 2, 5. Okay? And you're expected to know in the particular key that you're in what chord type chord 2 is and what chord type chord 5 is. 5 is always dominant, whether you're in major or minor. But, you know, chord 2 in a minor key is not minor. Chord 2, let's take D minor here. It's actually diminished. Because in the D minor scale, you have the B flat there, all right? So that's why it is diminished. And then 4 minor. And then 5, dominant. 6 is the B flat 1. And then 7 is diminished as well. Particularly dark, the minor, if you do minor chords. So that's the basic numbering system, and you can find all sorts of internet resources to look that up as well. So Google Nashville numbering system and you'll find out a load more details on how that works. But for right now, that's a whistle-stop tour on how we number chords and why it's important that we number chords, because it means that you can play a piece of music in any key. I don't have to be talking about G major. I don't have to be talking about B flat major. I don't have to be talking about A flat major. It doesn't matter. Or, you know, if I'm going 3, you know, like a 3-6-2-5-1, for example, which is a fairly standard set of chord changes, I can refer to any key. I don't have to specifically talk about A flat or F or whatever particular major key. I can say 3-6-2-5-1 and everybody should know what that is in the key that the song is in. So if the song is in G major, then chord 3 is going to be minor. Okay, so here's 3, and then 6 is also minor. 2 is minor, 5 is dominant. 1 is major, okay? So this is a fairly standard little progression. So if you're in a more kind of jazz context, a lot of those would be done as dominant chords rather than minor chords. So we have minor, 7 sharp 9, 2 minor, 5 dominant, 1 major 7. If you're in a more jazz kind of context, but if you're in a more kind of pop context, then you'd follow much more standard triadic rules. So B minor, E minor, A minor, D7, G. Okay, so I can talk about those that standard set of chord changes without referring to any key center. I can be talking about any key. And the beauty about something like the Nashville numbering system, or this numbering system I'm talking about here, is that if you're working on a session and you're working with a vocalist and they come in and they say, you know what, we're doing this in G, but really it's not suiting my voice. The range of the song is not suiting my voice too terribly well. Can we drop it down a tone? Can we go down to F? Everybody goes, yeah, no problem. And you start recording, because everybody knows what the numbering system is. They know that, okay, all we're doing is we're doing the same 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, except we're doing it in F this time, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. It's the same thing. It's just in a different key center. So that's why learning those kind of things, those kind of building block sets of chord changes are really important, because if you're playing with other musicians or you're collaborating with another songwriter and, this is the set of chord changes they've got, you know what you're doing. If you're an arranger, you know what you're doing. If you're a session player, a musician, you know what you're doing. But also, it's a nice little shortcut to have these little sets of chord changes in your vocabulary as well, because it's going to make the songwriting process faster and easier, because you can go, okay, I need to write this song in 30 minutes. And, for some people, they'll be like, no, there is no way I can write a song in 30 minutes. But there is, if you know a lot of vocabulary and a lot of things you can just drop straight into the song without any effort whatsoever. You can go, okay, I'm going to do 1, 6, 2, 5, 1 as my verse. So I'm going to go in G major. So I'm going to go 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. And then for my bridge, I'm going to do 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. I'll repeat that. And then for my chorus, I'm going to go to chord 4, because I've not gone to chord 4 yet. And I did that in about 2 minutes. Less. In fact, I did that in a few seconds. Because I know those chord changes. Because I've done this for over 30 years. I can draw upon those, and I could easily just write that as there. I've got a verse and a chorus instantly, just like that. So my verse, I had a clear idea what I was going to do. And my bridge, I had a clear idea what I was going to do. And for the chorus, I thought, you know what? I've not gone to chord 4 for this entire song so far. So let's just go 4, 1, 4, 1. And then we'll go 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 to finish it off. And it works. It's simple. It's effective. It takes next to no time. It requires very, very little effort. Now, what are you going to do about melody? Now that you've got chords, what are you going to do about melody? Well, we're sticking very much to a very clear pop, major, minor tonality for that little example there. So what would I do for melody? Well, I can either use chord tones, so basically the notes from the chords, make my melody, or I can find a common scale that fits all of those chords. In fact, in this case, there will be two common scales. There's the G major pentatonic scale, C, A, B, D, E. Those 5 notes will fit any of those chord changes, okay, for the entire song. So you can make your entire melody for your entire song out of those 5 notes. Or you can use the G major scale in its entirety. So G, A, B, C, C, D, E, F sharp, G. And all of those notes will fit. There will never be a wrong note if you use those scales. And you'll find that you'll be able to write a song very, very quickly. And this is how songwriters who are writing for radio jingles, for commercials, this is exactly how they write. They churn out these commercials, you know, in their hundreds. You know, in a week, they will have written 50 or 100 songs that are, you know, 1.5 to 2 minutes long. And they're all based around these kind of rudimentary ideas. Simple chord changes, simple melody, nice little beat, off you go. And you've got your little song. And it can become a classic, a defining classic. Even if it is just a jingle for a radio commercial or a TV ad or something. You know, having those building block chords can be very, very helpful. So things like a 3-6-2-5 progression is really, really helpful. 6-2-5-1 is also really helpful. Or 1, 4, and 5. I mean, the intro music there, it's that you would have heard. Hang on. All of that it's just a really, really complicated sounding, and it's not complicated at all, but it's a really complicated sounding 3-chord blues tune. It just uses G, C, and D. Literally, that's all there is in that tune. I've just made it a little complicated sounding by using some wide open voicings that don't really sound major or minor. But that's for another show. Voicings and things like that is for another show, and you can go very, very deep down a very, very long rabbit hole of chord voicings and how useful they are and how helpful they are for making something either sound really bright and pretty and beautiful, or really open and neither major nor minor. They're just open sounding. So that's a whole nother subject. But learning these bare bones basic songwriting and arranging blocks will help you develop your craft and make you faster at getting songs done and getting ideas for your songs done. But once you've got these things under your fingers, if you're a guitar player or a piano player, and getting the pentatonic scale and the major scale into your vocal cords and into your mind, so that you're able to quite quickly and easily come up with melodies and chord changes very effectively. Those are kind of rules. They are one particular set of vocabulary. There's a whole plethora of other chords and other scales that you can borrow to bring into your particular genre or your particular style. Even if your style is very pop orientated, or maybe it's a little bit R&B. R&B has a slightly more complex harmonic palette than maybe a pop song does. Pop songs don't tend to have a particularly incredibly complicated harmonic palette. But they will occasionally borrow chords that don't belong to your key. I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. So we've talked about 3-6-2-5-1 and all of that. Well, what would happen if I flattened the third? And borrowed a chord from the key of B flat major into my G major song. So let's turn this into a G major 9 chord. So I'm going to put a D major triad with a G in the bass. This is one of those nice modern sounding major chords that I like. And let's say I wanted to bring in this B flat major chord. And then I want to go to chord 5, but make chord 5 a little bit more interesting than just plain Jane, because after you've done those 2 major 7 chords, that sounds wrong. How about I go... So all I'm doing there is I'm going chord 1, and then I'm going flat 3, major 7, 2 to 1 again. But then I could do, so I do that maybe a couple of times. And then maybe this time I finish on a D chord, but I want to make it a bit more of an interesting sounding D chord, so I'm going to play a C major triad. Oh, there we go, C major triad, not B diminished. C major triad, C, E, G, but with a D at the bottom, which is basically a D11 chord. A bit more complicated way of describing C with a D in the bass. And that takes me back here, so I can just go... darn thing, and that's like a verse just there, but I'm using a different chord. I'm not using chord 4, I'm not using 3, I'm using flat 3. And what that does is that allows you access to this B flat major scale, which doesn't belong in the key of G major, to add a little bit of color. Okay, so that will provide you with a little bit of extra color. And you can also go to another B flat major kind of related chord. You could go to flat 6, which would be E flat major. So you could do this. Repeat that. And in keeping with that hip kind of major sound, I'm going B flat major triad with E flat in the bass. And then go down to that D11. And then we're going back to G major. So this has a little bit more of an R&B kind of flavor to it. But you can certainly borrow chords from different keys like that for a whole range of different styles of music. So, you know, let's say you're writing something a little bit more folk orientated, but we're still in G major. You could go to chord 6, but make it major instead of minor. This has an interesting sound. And it just adds a little bit of extra brightness because you're adding in this G sharp that doesn't belong to the key of C, to the key of G major. If you really want to go crazy, go down another minor third and go to C sharp. So go G, E, and then C sharp, and then you can do D again. And you just provide yourself with some extra colors and extra sounds. So you can borrow chords that belong to completely different key centers, and you can make them fit your song, and provide a little bit of an element of surprise for your listener, but also give you access to different colors, and also give you different access to different notes and scales that you can use to make your melodies. So we're about halfway through the show, so I hope that that has been helpful. A little bit kind of super fast, but really, really hopefully helpful in getting you some at least beginning ideas of how you can use chords from different keys to bring them into a particular key. So in that case, I was working in G major, but you could do this in any other key. You could do this in A flat if you wanted to, and just borrow chords from C flat major or any other key, or even a related key if you wanted to. So all of those things are possible once you know the rules. The secret is learn the rules, learn the bare bones basic building blocks that will make a house, because that's essentially what you're doing when you're learning to build. You're learning to build a wall. Once you've got building a wall down, you then learn how to build a house. Once you've got building a simple 2-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom house made and done, then you can start to expand and you can start to work on bigger and more exciting buildings, and maybe get into a little bit more abstract architecture. And this is exactly what you can do with music. Once you learn the bare bones basics and you can build a wall, you can make a simple song, you can then start expanding your harmonic palette and start bringing in chords that don't belong and making them fit. And that's the key. And that's how you get something that works. You get tension, you get release. And so long as you resolve your tensions, in most popular music styles, you will do well. So long as you resolve those tensions. So even using that B flat major chord, I'm resolving it. It's always resolving down to the chord 2. And even when I brought in the E flat major chord, I resolved that down to chord 5. So flat 6 goes down to chord 5. And it works. It brings the listener back to the key center that they are in. They're just having their ear temporarily pulled to this other key center, but then brought back again. So music in a popular music context is like a rubber band. The idea is you learn how far you can stretch the band before you need to let it go, so that it releases all of that tension again. And then, of course, you can get into music where actually the whole idea of the music is to load up the tension until the rubber band snaps. And that's the point of that particular type of music. Music like that does exist and is actually really satisfying to listen to. But okay, let's get into questions, because there were some questions here. Let's go up and see. So are thirds and fifths outdated? Paul asked earlier. No, they're not. They're really actually very useful. And here's the thing, even if you're working in a harmonic palette that's a little bit, modern sounding, like I was doing then, if I take a D major chord and put a G on the bottom, you get like a G major 9 kind of sound. But there's still that relationship there. There's still a major third there. Interval at the top there. You've got the 5th of the chord, the major 7th, but you're just losing the major 3rd. And you're making it a little bit tonally ambiguous by using the 9 instead, which is where the A of the D triad fits. And it does mean that you end up with and you just end up with something that sounds just a little bit more ambiguous, but quite modern sounding. So thirds and fifths are definitely not outdated. They're useful, but the thing is, the major third gives the indication of the the type of chord it is. Is it major or minor? The tonality, that's the word. The tonality of the chord. Is it major or minor? Now, in the particular style of music you're working in, maybe you want to go for something as tonally ambiguous as that, where you've got no major third in the chord at all. And you've just got this. And, you know, I like that sound. It sounds nice and modern, and it sounds open because there's no major third there. And as I said, Steely Dan and other groups like the Eagles made use of those kind of chords, and they work really well. Do you ever stack chords to build more complex voicings? Yeah, you certainly can do. For example, if I was to take, let's bring this over here a bit more. If I was to take a C major chord, and then if I was to put, say, a B flat major chord on top of it, what you have now is a C11 chord. Now, the problem with this is you've got a clash, a really ugly clash in the chord here between the 3rd and the 11th on the top. So in this case, you would probably be better if you took out the 3rd. And you can also, if you want, take out the 5th as well. But and then you end up with like a B flat over C, which is essentially the same thing. But let's say I want to do something a little bit more spicy. So I could take, say, a C major triad and a second inversion E major triad on the top. So we've got a major 7, we've got a double of the 3rd there, and now we've got a G sharp. Now, the thing with this one, it's actually quite a nice kind of sound. You actually hear this one in Star Wars, actually, in towards the end of the Imperial March, you hear this one. It's an interesting chord. But what's interesting about it is you've got root, 3rd, 5, major 7, and we're doubling the root. I'm going to leave that out. And then you've got the sharp 5 effectively on top. So you've got a natural 5 and a sharp 5. So in this way, if I was to describe this, I would maybe describe this as C major 7 flat 13. Why am I saying flat 13? Because here's the 13th, which has got the A natural on the top there. But with the E triad, there's the E triad, that makes it a flat 13. So I could drop that E because we've already got it here. We've got octaves there, so I could drop that E down to a D. Kind of changes the sound a little bit, but I could also raise that, or I could flatten it. Now we're starting to get a little bit too ugly. But as soon as I flat the 7, suddenly it takes on a whole new meaning altogether. It becomes a little bit jazzier. But yeah, certainly stacking chords is very, very cool. So, you know, see, how about D flat major on top of C? That can work. I don't know, let's say, how about F sharp on top of C? Oh, that's quite nice. Yeah, I kind of like that. You have to choose your voicing carefully. So now we've got like a C7 flat 9, sharp 11. Is what we end up with that there. Sounds nice in that particular voicing though. I like that. Let's drop that down an octave there. I've got big enough hands I can stretch. That works pretty well. So yeah, Stacking chords to build more complex voicings is actually a really cool thing to do, and it's a very quick and easy shortcut to pretty advanced jazz harmony. What about microtonal scales done by Oriental people? Yeah, and not just Oriental people. You get microtonal music all over Asia, Russia, Africa, Polynesia. You get microtonal music all over the place. What is microtonal music? What is meant by that? Well, in the Western equal tempered system where we have 12-tone equal temperament, what is 12-tone equal temperament? Basically, it means that the interval between each of the 12 semitones of the chromatic scale are exactly equal. So the distance between here and here and here and here is exactly the same. So it's equal, it's tempered equally. So the interval of a semitone is equal right across the whole instrument. And the octave is divided into 12 equal semitones. So when we talk about microtonal music, what we're talking about is those notes that are actually in between these notes, which you don't get on the piano. Because the piano was not designed that way. But there are other instruments where you can actually play those microtones. You can do that. You can do that on a fretless bass. You can do it on a violin, a viola, a cello, an upright bass. Most fretless instruments, you can get to those microtones. Same with woodwind instruments. There's special fingerings you can do to be able to get to those notes between notes. So that's what is meant by microtone, an interval smaller than a semitone. So that's, again, a little bit of a whole other very complex and advanced musicological concept, which most people here will not really need to get into, because most people here are not writing microtonal music. But if you're writing lo-fi hip-hop, for example, microtones will come in very, very handy, and they're well worth getting into and exploring. If you're into lo-fi hip-hop music, definitely microtones are definitely going to be a thing that you're going to want to get into and explore. But for most people, that's not going to be the case. But it's a good question. Paul Morgan says, why are Donald and Walter so good as writers in your opinion? Is it melody or the underpinnings? I think it's the fact that they, because they are such perfectionists, or were, because sadly Walter is no longer with us, but Donald is still here and he is still writing songs. I think it's because they are such perfectionists, they pay attention to detail with their songs. So their songs aren't just about really good melodies and really interesting and sophisticated sounding chord changes, but it's the arrangement, it's everything that goes into it. I mean, for example, just listen to the title track from Asia, the record Asia. Listen to all the details that are going on. You'll find that there are layers of guitars, kind of like a guitar choir, where you have 7 or 8 guitars all playing single line to make the chords. Why are they doing that? Simple, because the chord voicings are not really possible on a guitar. So because they wanted to have that guitar kind of rock and roll sound, they had to stack up these single line guitars. But it actually creates a really, really cool, sophisticated sound that I don't think anybody else had really done before. But you also get things like there's a marimba in there, there's tempo blocks, there's all sorts of little things in there. There's even a police whistle at one point. Plus you get Steve Gadd's drum solo and the duet that he does with tenor sax player Wayne Shorter as well. But there's lots of different individual elements that go to make the song really, really work. There's lots of ear candy. So I think that's what, for me, makes their songs really, really successful, is that there is a lot to listen to. There's a lot of things to hear. As well as there's really good, very, very amusing lyrics, because essentially Walter and Donald write funny songs. And, you know, they've said that themselves in interviews. They've said, you know, hey, what we write is we write about things that make us laugh, things that we find funny. And they just dress them up in this really sophisticated kind of film noir kind of lyrical style, pulling on literary devices from, you know, 1950s novels and 1950s films. And then they throw jazz harmony at it, and somehow it becomes this unique alloy that nobody had really done before. I mean, you know, who on earth has ever decided to you know, write a song about Bodhisattva and Hinduism and Eastern mysticism, and then set that to a heavy rock beat? There are not many bands that have done that before, but they did that with a song called Bodhisattva. And it's actually a really good song. There's lots and lots to listen to, other than the incredibly awesome guitar solos. Let's see, what else do we have here question-wise? Brett Muller says, Barry Mellon cut his teeth as a songwriter by writing a famous McDonald's jingle in the 1970s. I heard about that, yeah. I heard about that. But a lot of songwriters, when they start out, they end up, you know, kind of writing for jingles to get started. Let's see. Mike Johnson is saying, why do I hear dissonance in that? I'm not sure what he's referring to, but anyway. Brett says C# in the key of G gives you a Lydian tonality. Yeah, it really does. And that's kind of like taking if I was in G major, but then instead of making chord 2 minor, which is what it normally would be, let's make it major instead. So let's keep the G in the bass, but put the A on the top. You can go absolutely crazy. Keep that G down there, go A major, B major, C# major, E flat major, E major, F sharp, and then come back. So doing A over the G gives you that Lydian sound, which is basically like taking the G major scale and raising the 4. So if you want to make your G major vamps a bit more interesting, do a G, keep the G in the bass, and do an A chord. And then maybe go to chord C, and go C with D in the bass. And there, right there, you've got yourself a weird sounding blues. And then you just go. And right there, I've taken the 12-bar blues and I've given it a completely different harmonic sound with very, very little effort. There we go. All right, so we are 3 minutes to go. Let's see. Oh, Anonymous Housewife is here. I didn't see her come in the door, which is awesome. Welcome. Glad you're here. Peter Brooks is here as well. Who else is here that I didn't see come in? Other than Mike. I'm just looking back up on this. Paparaptor Music is here as well. I end up on those notes between the notes when singing, usually unintentionally. Yeah, I have done that myself too. All right, so yeah, tritone is another useful thing that we can look into as well. All right, so other interesting chords that provide a little bit of a different tonality there. You know, you can do the A thing, A over G. You can also do a D flat over G. It's a bit more of a a discordant, spicy sound, but it works. And you can also do, for example, the beginning of the jazz standard Misty. It starts with this chord. Starts with a D over the E flat. And then it resolves up to the E flat. But it does actually start with that chord. The D major belongs to the chord a half step below it. And Misty is in E flat. So it's another thing you can do. Paul Morgan says, what do you think about Toto's contribution with so many sessions like Thriller? Michael Jackson's Thriller has Steve Vai, I think, on it. Or is it Steve Lukather? Might have been Steve. It was Steve Lukather on Thriller. Great guitar solo. Really, really good. And yeah, Toto are a great band, and they've written some really superb songs that I really, really like. You know, things like Africa is a great song, and Jeff Beccaro, who was their drummer, also played on a lot of Steely Dan records. So, you know, there's a lot of common ground to be shared there. But you also get members of the Eagles singing backup vocals on Steely Dan songs, which is also interesting as well. But there we go. I think we are pretty much at the end of the show right there, because it just clicked over to 1 o'clock here. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming and for your awesome questions. We actually peaked here at 25, which is actually a bit of a record for Songwriting Simplified. Normally, Songwriting Simplified doesn't really get to more than 20, so we've got to 25, which is really, really cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you very, very much. I hope you found this useful and helpful. If you did, hit the like button. If you have not yet subscribed, please go ahead and do that as well, and hit the notification bell and select all notifications. That way you don't miss a thing. I've got a lot of stuff coming. I know I keep saying that, but I really actually do. And I know it's May, but I really actually do have a bunch of videos coming. I've got a few Notion videos coming, because a few people have requested that I do a little bit about notation. So I'm going to do some videos on Notion Mobile, which you can get into quickly and easily, and it's cross-platform, so you can use it on pretty much any device. So yeah, that's coming, and there's a few other videos coming as well. But otherwise, I will see you on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. Have a great few days. I'll see you then. Good night, everybody. Take care. Oh, and don't forget the Studio One meetup at 8 p.m. Central, which is in an hour's time. So in about an hour, get yourselves over to the Studio One meetup. The link is there in the chat. Billy Morgan, thank you very much for doing that. And I will see yous all later. Take care, folks. Good night. Good night, folks.